host of Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, and I am pleased that we are going to have a show today featuring one of my favorite long-standing activist extraordinaire, Hill staffer, Joel Siegel. But before we go there, this week in Social Security and Medicare news, the Social Security trustees released a report actually showing that the Social Security's trust fund remained the same. The year for projected insolvency, quote unquote, is the year 2033. And I know that my listeners know that insolvency does not mean bankruptcy. It does not mean that the Social Security trust funds will not be able to pay out benefits in the year 2033. It just means that there will be a shortfall experienced. And so with that, we know that there are things that can be done well in advance of that date to put Social Security on a path to long-term solvency. And one of the primary proposals that's out there that justifies Social Security's extending Social Security solvency is, of course, lifting the cap on wages. In Medicare news, we learned that solvency for Medicare will be extended a few years because of Medicare medical cost savings that have been experienced some people are speculating it's because of the impact of Obamacare. Certainly there are other pressures on providers and medical hospitals to make sure that billing is kept under control as they head into the Obamacare era. But in other Medicare news, we also heard that immigrants, the last time I was on the show, and I'm pleased to be back because I've actually been gone for the past few weeks, I actually featured a segment on the role that immigration plays in Social Security and Medicare solvency. At the time, we had a figure for Social Security solvency showing that immigrants paid into the Social Security system and did not, of course, get out in the amounts that they put in. But now, with the new release that was done this week, a new study, we know that immigrants are actually contributing to Medicare to the tune of tens of billions, as in B, of dollars each year. And they're not getting out, not nearly as much as what they're paying in. What's more, in 2009, the study showed that immigrants actually paid in $33 billion into the system, and as you well know, they're not getting that out. Compared to, listen to this, native-born Americans are not contributing as much as immigrants are, which is interesting. People born in the United States contributed $192 billion and received $233 billion in benefits, whereas the study found that immigrants contribute $33 billion in 2009, and they received only about 8%. That was $19 billion of expenditures through Medicare. And so we know that immigration reform is on the docket, and we know that there are ways that the system is actually taking advantage of poor, low-income people of color, primarily immigrants, and this is it. And so immigration reform has a chance, an opportunity to correct the record. And so it'll be interesting, and we will be watching to see what the policymakers on Capitol Hill do to actually set the record straight and to make sure that our system is more fair for all populations. And with that, I'd like to welcome Joel Siegel. Joel, I'm hopeful, is on the line.
Yes.
Hi, Joel.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to find housing for my brother whose Social Security check is so minuscule that he cannot afford housing. So you really hit the nail on the head about Social Security and the problems there, but you paid me a wonderful compliment. I'd like to pay you a compliment. Whenever I get a little bummed out about Social Security, I say, well, at least Maya Rockeymoore is in D.C., and I look forward to your show on MSNBC when that happens. And if there's ever going to be an African-American female president, I think you would be the first, or at least senator. So I'm honored that you've asked me to be on the show. I'm crazy about you, and thank you for having me.
And you know I'm crazy about you. Actually, let's go to your brother. Is he disabled, or is he an older adult?
He's my brother is disabled and severe diabetes, and was an entrepreneur for a long time, and he just had actually major surgery, and his check was about $850 per month, which was not enough to really find an apartment, even in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the prices of the apartments are about half of what they are in D.C. But I had to raise money for him just to get him food, and it's heartbreaking when this is your older brother who you've been close to all your life, and he's very religious. We're Jewish. He's very observant. He's pillar of the community, so forth and so on. And my mother, who is 83, her check is about, I think it was $780, and I've had to send both of them money. I'm not the only one. There are millions of people who have to do this. I do it out of love, but I had my daughter just got out of college, and between my daughter and my mom and my brother, this is an unsustainable system. I think that being the wealthiest country in the world, we could raise the cap that you're talking about to maybe $250,000 and above, and our Social Security system would be solvent for forever. And but you can't live off that amount. It's shameful to live in a country like this when I think they should have a minimum of $2,500 a month. And I tried to work on that when I was working as a staffer in Congress, but there really wasn't much of a constituency for that idea. But
Joel, it's interesting that you bring that up because that is the adequacy. We always talk about Social Security solvency, but we never talk about the adequacy of Social Security benefits. And what you're raising is a fact that many Americans actually run into, that the Social Security check is, while great, it's certainly based on the earnings that you made while you were working, and certainly if it weren't there, we'd all be devastated. But they actually need to be better, more robust, stronger. And so we've been pushing, along with a coalition of others, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, Social Security Works, the Commission to Modernize Social Security. A lot of groups have been now focused on how do we make Social Security benefits stronger, particularly for those who are most vulnerable, like the disabled, like those who are very low earning during their working lives. And so this is the next great frontier of organizing, Joel, as you well know. Tell me, how resistant do you think that policymakers on Capitol Hill are to the idea of expanding Social Security benefits, given that they've talked about cutting them for so long?
They are. First of all, I'm glad to hear that you're working on this, because if anyone can help lead the charge of improving our Social Security, it's Maya Rockeymoore. And count me in as part of your team, because I've just recently decided that I'm going to devote the rest of my life to the same cause. I think they're resistant in both parties. I think the Black Caucus and Progressive Caucus, probably Hispanic Caucus, would be more receptive to that idea, but not unless there was a robust, have to be a major, grassroots movement like civil rights or the movement that I worked with you on, universal health care, for all these years. Because the refrain that I hear when I ever talk about increasing Social Security benefits is, this would be among progressive Democratic staffers too, which I found to be very disappointing. They bought into the right-wing rhetoric that the trust fund is going bankrupt and it's going to be insolvent, and how can we expand benefits when we have a system that's going bankrupt? And when I would explain to them what you had mentioned about raising the cap, they would not entertain that concept or even have a conversation about it. And what we're going to have to do is organize the millions and millions of people who cannot survive off this benefit, and have them become a new constituency. Otherwise, it'll be sort of a theoretical construct, and it'll be a numbers game for people. But on the positive note, the fact that there are so many, it's not positive that there are a lot of people who are out of work, but it's positive for movement building. There are a lot of people who are worried that because they've been out of work for long periods of time, Maya, that they won't have Social Security. And so we can organize not only those whose benefits are, minuscule, but those who worry that they won't have any benefits at all. And then we can begin that very important national discussion, which is, what kind of country are we going to be? Do we want to live in? Are we going to be a moral nation where we take care of each other, or are we going to be a nation where a small group of people have 401ks and trust funds and they don't have any thing to worry about, where millions of other people can't sleep at night because they're worried about how are they going to survive, either disabled now, or if you're a veteran waiting for those benefits that have been promised to you, that you're waiting because there's a backlog. But this is the next frontier. It's the new economic rights: universal health care, universal access to housing, childcare, education, and a job. And I think that's what I'm interested in working on for the duration of my life.
So you have actually raised several of the very points that I'd like to confer and discuss with you on today, and that is the fact that unemployment is a major issue, and this is something that you've prioritized over your working life. But many of my listeners actually don't know that actually having years of unemployment on your record actually has an impact on their Social Security benefits. So when you take time out of the workforce, and for women, it's often to have babies and care for loved ones, and for men, and particularly low-income and minority men, it's often these populations that take the burden of unemployment when the economy goes south. And that has an impact on Social Security benefits, because the Social Security Administration, when it's time for you to retire, it looks at all of your working years. It drops out a few of the years based on your lowest earnings, but it checks your highest earning years over a period of time, and it calculates a measure. If you have more years of zero earning, that means that you're going to have less of a Social Security benefit upon retirement, because that's actually the way the formula is constructed. And so with that, Joel, you also mentioned that the Capitol Hill staffers weren't receptive, that they bought into the right-wing arguments. But what do we know about Capitol Hill staffers? We know that they're very, very young. Do we not?
Yes.
And
yes.
And so coming straight from college, oftentimes they're in a position of actually educating members of Congress, but they're not educated themselves about the issues.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad that you raised that. I left the Hill only, I think, 4 weeks ago, and I was there for 13 years. In fact, I got to work with you for many years. I love the institution. It is such a great place to work. There's so many dedicated people, but the two problems that I saw was, one, it was racially non-diverse. And it was racially and ethnically non-diverse, but it was also, in terms of the age group, the kids were too young to have experienced life. And because it was ethnically non-diverse, they couldn't understand experiences of those from other communities, or I didn't see that they were really even trying to. I'm not saying that there were not staffers who were, progressive and smart and empathetic, but the majority of them did not have the experience to be able to counsel, a member of Congress in the way where it would be more progressive and enlightened. And that's not going to change, in my opinion, until there's campaign finance reform, and you don't have to raise $1 billion to run for president. But what happens is, in order to get a job on the Hill, a lot of times these kids become interns because their parents have money, so they're able to withstand that financial pressure of not, being paid while on a job, and then they move into those permanent Hill slots. And this is why there would have to be a major movement from the outside, whether it be something like the African National Congress or I'm getting into maybe one of the solutions, maybe a little too fast here, but I do not see change happening from either party that's systemic and transformational. And there's a lot of Paul Krugman, the economist Paul Krugman, calls it intellectual confusion. There's not enough literacy among the staff and the members about how to solve problems. And one of the reasons why is because they're spending a lot of time raising money, which does not give them, the members, enough time to become literate on policy, and the staff are too busy writing press releases and doing things so they can get reelected every 2 years. You can't solve Social Security if you're going to get reelected every 2 years. They should have 6-year terms. But it needs to be a national discussion also about, Congress and who's in there and what are we going to do to make sure that they work for the 99%, not, the 1%. But we don't have a lot of time, because if Social Security can become insolvent, in a few years, and millions of people are going to be deprived of benefits. We need to have that discussion now about how do we accomplish and garner real on-the-ground political power, the kind of political power that elected Barack Obama, which I didn't think I would see in my lifetime. But it shows that it can be done, if you're serious about change.
The desire is out there. But the fact of the matter is that most Americans think that showing up at the voting booth and pulling the lever is the change that's necessary. But the fact of the matter is that many policymakers actually get into office and then they legislate from a different position. Now, you didn't have that problem. You actually worked for a very liberal member of Congress, somebody who has been in favor of universal health care, true universal health care, single payer, somebody who has been for jobs for all and has explored that. And so to the extent that you do have policymakers who care about these issues, yet they find themselves marginalized even when they have seniority, what do you think is really going on?
I mean, you're illuminating a great point. You also worked for a very, a giant of a member of Congress as well. And the problem, I think, is if you have 80-plus members of who are progressive, either CBC, Black Caucus members, or Progressive Caucus, that has to be doubled. We need to get to about 100, maybe 70 to 180 progressive members, so that someone like a John Conyers or a Maxine Waters or a Barbara Lee or Dennis Kucinich aren't viewed as, far left, but would be viewed as mainstream progressives. And I don't think that can happen, and I'm optimistic about this. I think it's going to happen. There has to be a unified organization with a lot of money in the bank. Think of it as a Tea Party, but progressive, well-funded organizers in 435 congressional districts in 50 states. Okay. When I've raised that issue over the years, eyes kind of glazed over, or people kind of looked at me like, I was crazy. And I'm like, no, it's not crazy to have political power, so you can actually win single payer or jobs for all. But that's a discussion that organizers and progressives have not had in a long time. Why are we losing so many battles that we should win? How do we get this new demographic of young Hispanics and African Americans and liberal white kids who are influenced by hip hop and are more in tune with progressive ideology, seniors, labor, students? How do we put them under one umbrella, like the Tea Party put all the conservatives on the right wing under one umbrella, and then take over the Congress? And people might say, "Whoa, that's a radical idea." I call that, if one thinks democracy is a radical idea, then I'd say it's a radical idea. But this country allows us, through democracy, to shape it and form it the way we want to. It's tough, it's hard, but if we don't have that conversation about progressives garnering political power, I don't think there's going to be much change within the Congress.
I think we'll have an opportunity to talk more about that in the second half of the show. But let's talk about jobs for all. We have been for several years now, ever since the crash hit and the economy took a dive south, talking about how to integrate a jobs program, a large jobs program to offset the unemployment that has happened as a result of the economic recession. Tell me what a jobs for all, an ideal jobs for all policy would look like.
Sure. I had the great pleasure to work with Congressman Conyers and his staff on the bill. It's called H.R. 1000. It's a Humphrey Hawkins Jobs Act, and basically it would be an updated version of the New Deal, Roosevelt's New Deal, but on a local level. So I'll briefly explain how it would work. We could tax Wall Street, put that into a trust fund in the Department of Labor. Let's say it's $200 to $300 billion a year. Could be even as high as $600 to $700 billion. Mayors or governors could apply to that fund. They could create their own job programs. Let's say it's building bridges, or it could be hiring more students to be teachers' aides, or to do child care. It could be to renovate dilapidated housing. It could be mentoring. Could be green jobs. There's lots of work that needs to be done to rebuild our infrastructure, repair our inner cities, lay broadband. The problem is that the local communities don't have the money to do that. Under Conyers' bill, they would apply to that fund. The money would go directly to the cities or the states. They would create their own training programs, like based on what exists, like the Job Corps training program. And once they're trained, put a person right on the job, pay them a livable wage, and there you go. Sound like science fiction? It's not. It was called the New Deal. That's what Roosevelt did when he hired millions of people, the federal government, to build rural electrification systems and parks and roads and bridges. A highly successful program. You can have nonprofit, organizations who can't afford to hire more people. They could be hired to do literacy programs or child care programs. So that's basically one way it would work. And then the spinoff, they call it the multiplier effect. When people have money from that public job, they're going to buy goods and services, could be clothes, could be shoes, they could go to restaurants. Then that means the private sector would be able to hire more people because there would be more demand. And small businesses are not hiring in Charlotte, North Carolina, because they don't perceive there's enough demand out here. Without government investment and public investment, it's going to be tough to turn this economy around right now.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because, jobs is the answer to everything. It's the answer to deficit and debt. They've been trying to do an austerity program, and what austerity measures have been put in place so far, the cuts that have been done at the federal level, have actually had the effect of reducing the deficit. But job creation will get us there much faster, and it also has a positive impact on the trust funds of Social Security and Medicare. When more people are working, they're paying their payroll taxes, and then the funds become more robust, and then we extend the solvency of the programs for several more years. Joel, you and I have been partners in crime. Actually, not partners in crime. Partners in prosperity, if you will, to the extent that we have been focused on also how do we make sure that all Americans have access to health care. And what we've had, I know that John Conyers and you have been advocates for single-payer health reform, in some respects Medicare for all, but what we got was the Affordable Care Act. What's your perspective on what happened, and can you describe to me how the universal health care plan that you all subscribe to would have had a different effect? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the current state of our health care system, it's about 50 million people uninsured, 30 million underinsured. Close to 45,000 people die each year, Maya, because they don't have health care. About 1 million or so bankruptcies a year because people can't afford to pay their bills. Most of them had insurance when they filed. What we passed, which they call Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, very simple. Approximately 15 million people will get private insurance. Their monthly premium will be paid by the government. If you're at a higher income level. If you're at a lower income level, right around 16 million people will be eligible for Medicaid. But many of the states, because of the Supreme Court decision, don't have to participate. It's going to be a big problem. So I was involved, as you were involved, for many years in the universal health care movement. And there were different movements. One was for single payer, universal single payer, that Mr. Conyers led and Barbara Lee led. What we wanted was a system which would be an improved and expanded Medicare for all. It's a very successful system. It has a 3% administrative overhead. Every system in the world that provides quality universal health care that's cost-effective is single-payer, whether it's Taiwan system, the Canadian system, European systems. If they're not completely publicly financed, some allow some private insurance. And we felt like it would make sense to study all those models and then come up with a unique American publicly financed system. So about 40 doctors came together and economists, and we came up with H.R. 676, which garnered more co-sponsors than any other universal health care bill in the Congress. But what happened was Senator Baucus, he took that off the table as a possible solution to universal health care. I remember you led one of the seminars on single payer. It was one of the best seminars that we had ever seen. You explained it so beautifully, and it's real simple. You show your card, you go to any hospital you want, any doctor you want, and that hospital would already have an annual budget. Just think of the public school, right? You don't have to show an insurance card to get into a public school. You go because it's publicly financed. And if you're a private doctor, you would show your card and they would be reimbursed, except it would just be Medicare for all. Lessons learned is you have to have a much more powerful, on-the-ground political organization to get to a single-payer bill passed. What the Affordable Care Act, though, allows, though, is that possibility, because in 2017, states would be allowed to use that Affordable Care Act dollars, which is close to $1 trillion over 10 years, to innovate. They could come up, for example, with a single-payer system like Vermont. Mm-hmm. And Vermont has passed into law, signed by the governor, a bill that closely resembles Conyers 676 Medicare for All bill. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that activists, I think, are going to need to do is put pressure on Congress to fund that Vermont model and make it work, because if it works, then the rest of the states could go, my God, single payer does work. There's no waiting lines. It's quality care. It's not bankrupting the state. And as Vermont goes, maybe Colorado goes, and California, and so forth and so on. And I would close by saying, if we spent over $100 billion, maybe more, trying to fund Star Wars research, remember the laser beams in space?
I remember that. I remember.
Knock down the rockets. And these were systems that scientists knew wouldn't work. I would say it would make sense to, spend a few billion on Vermont on a program that has been working in countries all over the world, including our neighbor to the north. Canada. And Canada, that's right. Contrary to public belief, only a 4-week waiting time, incredible quality, people love it. There was a problem in the 80s where there were some waiting lines for elected surgeries, like if you had to have a hip surgery or something, or a cataract taken out. And what they did is, when the conservative governments were voted out of power and progressive governments were voted in, they just funded the specialty care and made sure they had more machines and technology, and it worked great. But what's the key to a universal system or single-payer system? It's investment. The more investment into it, and that's infrastructure, doctors, and technology, the better it is. So given that we're so wealthy, we would have the best universal single-payer system the world's ever seen, because we have probably one of the highest gross domestic products, GDP. I think it's 12.6 trillion, something like that. Right. So it would work. It's just that we have the right-wing hardliners called insurance companies and drug companies have brainwashed us for so many years to make us think that it won't work without any examination by the press or barely any. Michael Moore, I worked with him on Sicko. That's what we were trying to do, was to show that it works in every other country. Mm-hmm. But at the very minimum, I think we should. Every uninsured person right now should be on Medicaid. There's just too many people that I'm trying to help get Medicaid right now that can't get surgeries, or even if they have cancer. Obamacare starts in January, but I think step one would be to take that money that we're giving to the states, instead of setting up the exchanges. I hope they work. I don't think they're going to work. Is just use that for an improved Medicaid program.
So October 1st is the date that people are starting to sign up, and January 1st, 2014 is the date that it's supposed to all begin for almost everybody except for the small businesses, and that implementation date has been delayed by a year. But with that, I'm going to have to take a break. Joel, please stay with me.
Sure.
You are listening to Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We'll be right back after the break.
I read you a lot on the social insurance list.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
This is John Bauman. You know me best as Bowser, formerly of the group Sha Na Na. But these days, I'm rocking and rolling nationwide as part of the Truth Tour with the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Some politicians claim they want to protect Medicare, but the truth is they support the Romney-Ryan Coupon Care plan, which would end traditional Medicare. This could raise our health care costs as much as $500 more each month. Ending Medicare doesn't protect it. Learn the facts and join our national campaign at thetruthnow.org.
Social Security and Medicare. These programs touch the lives of virtually every American family. Yet with so much misinformation out there, Americans are pretty confused about their future. You deserve the truth. For more than 30 years, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare has been leading the fight to preserve our nation's most successful programs. Join us and find out how to keep Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid strong for all generations. Learn more online at thetruthnow.org.
This is John Bauman. You know me best as Bowser, formerly of the group Sha Na Na. And you know, when we were rocking and rolling all those years ago, I wasn't particularly worrying about my retirement or how I'd pay for health care. But now that I'm 65, I really understand the importance of Medicare. Not just for myself, but for generations of working Americans who need secure health care as they get older. That's why this election is so important. The Romney-Ryan Coupon Care plan will mean the end of traditional Medicare. It gives seniors a partial payment which loses value over time and raises our health care costs as much as $500 more each month. Coupon Care also puts us at the mercy of private insurers, making it harder to pick our own doctors. All of this to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy? Are you kidding me? Americans of all ages say no to Coupon Care. Bum 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 dang a dang dang ding a dong ding. Preserve Medicare.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome to Pivot Point. I am your host, Maya Rockeymoore, and we're talking to Joel Siegel, a longtime Hill staffer, recently retired. He is an activist extraordinaire. And we're also joined by Melissa Byrne. She is a campaign organizer, consultant, looking for jobs. So if you're listening, think about her. She has worked for the SEIU. She has done political community organizing for Obama for America. She has also worked for AFL-CIO, Win Without War, among many other progressive causes. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And in a moment, we'll be joined by Zed Jelani, who is an investigative blogger at Progressive Change Campaign Committee and a former senior reporter, blogger for thinkprogress.org. Zed's not on the phone with us, is he? No, he's not on yet. So, Melissa, Joel and Joel, you're still there, right? So Joel and I have been talking about, the things that progressives want, our wish list, which includes universal health care, preferably single payer, which includes jobs for all, preferably a program like the New Deal, certainly better adequacy for Social Security and Medicare. And the list goes on in terms of the things that can be done to make this nation what it should be, the wealthiest nation in the world. And Joel has pointed out several times now that he thinks that the main challenge keeping us from getting to where we need to go on the policy sphere is organizing. Do you think that the progressive organizing infrastructure is weak?
I think there's challenges there. Unfortunately, so many times in the progressive organizing sphere, we're organizing on these deadlines that either come from Capitol Hill or come because of elections, so we're not able to do the deep base building work that we need to do for progressive politics, and it's a lot of working towards short-term victories. Right now, higher education is the perfect example. For the last 3 years, they've seen wins as focusing on cutting interest rates for the federal loans, like the Stafford loans, which doesn't actually go to the big problem, which is the enormous principal that people are getting out on student loans. But right now, there's only been organizing happening on interest rates, which amount to saving people maybe $1,000 over the course of their loans, which is pennies when you're looking at principals of $100,000, $50,000.
Who dictates that kind of focus? I mean, is there somebody in the sky that says, you can only focus on interest rates, you can't focus on reducing principal? I mean, how does that get decided?
Well, first, it's what's actually winnable in Congress. Unfortunately, with the way the Congress is set up between the House and the Senate right now, there's limited things that are in the realm of reasonable that's being passed. Has to do with what funders are able to fund and what other competing environments are happening. We have a very tight schedule right now between wanting and needing to get so many things to accomplish in the next few months, between the comprehensive immigration reform, getting guns off the street, getting an environmental bill passed. So there's limited space, and when you can have a small victory like interest rates, that cuts off having a longer term discussion.
Joel, are you still with us?
Yeah, hey, Mike.
Joel, I have heard what Melissa just said in terms of the art of what's possible based on perceived how Capitol Hill will receive issues, instead of thinking about the idea of let's go after whatever's possible, instead of thinking from a position of limited. What can happen, and I'm not being clear because, but have you heard that same argument from the inside that this can only get done because this is where the members are right now?
Yeah, and hey, Melissa, I'm honored to be on the call with you, and I hope
Likewise.
that you are hired instantaneously. It's great to have someone like you in D.C. And my daughter, who is 26, just got accepted into the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. But she had to quit school because she couldn't afford any more to stay in school. She's all excited. She made honor roll at her community college. So now we're going over, the college loans. And she said, Dad, I want to go, but I don't want to come out of school with all, thousands and thousands of dollars in debt. And I posed the question to her. I said, in Europe, college is free. In almost every industrialized country in the world, college is publicly funded. And right now, there is $1 trillion in debt. That's how much students owe on their loans, $1 trillion. Imagine if college was free, Dr. Rockeymoore, and think of all the jobs that could be created if we built student housing. Think of all the money that could go back into the economy to buy goods and services. If we didn't, that's $1 trillion that could go back into the economy. I think the discussion, yes, we need to have lower interest rates on student loans, but I think the larger question is, why are we allowing this insane idea of coming out with $200,000, $150,000 in debt when we're in a deep recession? Why don't we just have school publicly financed from, instead of it being 0 to 12, how about 0 to 16, college free, graduate school paid for like they do in Sweden. And I think that's the discussion that we have to have. Because
and I think the other part,
yeah.
just to cut in here, the other part is that we have it flipped in terms of we expect only people over the age of 60 to care about Social Security and Medicare, and we expect only people between the ages of 18 to 22 to care about college costs, when actually it's flipped, because people who are 18 to 22 need to care about Social Security and Medicare, because it's that age group and basically the age group under 40 that any changes to the programs will impact negatively. Right. And it's people who are in that 40 to 50 age group who have their children are about to go to college, and they're the ones who are either going to be taking their retirement and investing their retirement security into their kids being able to come out of college debt free, or are going to be going into more debt for their kids to go to college. So we really need to switch these interest groups instead of narrowing and defining who is concerned about what issue, and to really being able to have looking at these issues over the course of one's lifetime, because they're intertwined. We're not going to have my age group in the mid 30s isn't going to have retirement security because we're still paying off college loans and then being able to pay for our kids' college. And yet they're coming after Social Security and Medicare, and people that are older are panicking about their children's future and their grandchildren's future. And we need to get it out of these like buckets of people only on small age cohorts who care about these issues.
Yeah. Zed Jelani is with us. He is an investigative blogger at Progressive Change Campaign Committee. He's a former senior reporter and blogger for thinkprogress.org. Welcome, Zed.
Yeah, great to be here.
You know what Melissa was just arguing is that we need to actually have intergenerational organizing, that you have various demographic groups by age that are usually kind of pigeonholed into issue area, when the reality is that, there are these issues actually affect everyone. And so how do you organize around something like that, actually mobilizing an intergenerational movement on issues as diverse as Social Security, Medicare, and student college loans?
Yeah, this reminds me of something that was really fascinating. I think it was around 2011. There was a town hall somewhere, I think it may have been Michigan, and it was a Republican congressman talking about Paul Ryan's plan and how, it'll only affect people who are, 55 or over, a certain age and over. If you're already in the program right now, you're fine. And a senior citizen got up and said, you're trying to divide us seniors, and our kids. You're saying that, we can get this great Medicare program, but our kids have to have something different that's going to be a lot worse. And, they got a raucous applause for it. So I think a lot of it is just the people in those groups themselves have to themselves reject this division and say that it's a fake division, because in a sense, the politics of this issue has traditionally been that politicians like to talk to seniors for Social Security, or they like to talk to students about their loans and debt and their tuition. But the reality is, I'm sure everyone knows this, you start as a child and you go all the way through being a senior citizen. I mean, these things matter to you throughout your entire life, and even if they don't matter to you right now, if you're 25 and you don't care about Medicare, or if you're, you're a senior citizen but you just have grandkids, they're going to go to college, right? So I think so much of this is just people in those groups themselves refusing to see these issues in a siloed way that sort of separates them out from problems that really they themselves or their friends and family will be having.
Right, and I think if you remember back to the 2008 elections, they had the great schlep, which brought all of the grandchildren going down to Boca Raton to talk with their grandparents about why they should vote for Obama. Imagine if instead of just getting investment in electoral campaigns, we could have a program where they have a reverse great schlep, where you have grandparents having the talk with their grandkids about Social Security and Medicare, and having that intergenerational organizing happening through families. I think that would be really powerful. It'd be great to have people in college talking with parents of newborns about why it's up to them to start organizing to change the way we pay for higher education, to think beyond loans and think outside of Sallie Mae, so that company goes away. And just to really get creative and really call on the funders to invest things outside of the election year campaigns, outside of the quick one-hit petition campaigns.
You bring up, when you talk about funders, and I'm going to direct this to Zed, but when Melissa mentioned earlier that funders often dictate, when it comes to campaign organizing, often dictate what the political and policy goals are, and that they're often short-term and very limited with regard to policy scope. But at the same time, funders claim that they're open to ideas. So what is it that the campaign funding infrastructure is designed to produce this short-term outcome? And how can that be changed structurally to get them to invest in ongoing organizing beyond election cycle organizing? Zed?
Yeah, so I mean, the problem that you guys bring up with in terms of short-term incentivizing politics is it's across the board a problem. You see organizations sort of organizing around the next piece of legislation, but not like a 10-year vision. You see politicians thinking about their next election or even their post-election job, if they go into lobbying or something, but not thinking about what's going to happen to the next generation of people who are on Capitol Hill. It's a problem across the board. And I think that the biggest things that sort of break that path are just movements that you really don't see coming that are about, I guess the best word for it is solidarity. You saw this, I think, with what happened, like I said, in 2011 when Paul Ryan was pushing his plan really hard, was that you saw young people and senior citizens showing up at town halls saying that we're in this together and we don't want to, throw Medicare in the gutter like he did. Mm-hmm. You saw it again with Occupy, and that you saw really, I met so many older people who were telling me they were excited by it and they wanted to be part of it and they were supporting it, or they were donating money to camps, things like that. Whereas you had younger people actually sitting, doing the occupations and facing out with police and and doing disruptive sort of protests. So, I think the biggest thing to get funders involved in this is just to show that there is a lot of interest in this and that there are activists who are willing to do this longer-term work and who aren't just focused on the sort of the next short-term victory. I mean, funders do, to some extent, dictate how these organizations approach these issues, but I think it's kind of circular too, in that they see this is how I, as someone who likes to donate to Common Cause or whatever, I see that as my way of engaging in politics, because that's what we do. We organize around a bill, we win that bill, then we go home, right? So I think both sides need to sort of approach it in the same way that you saw sort of the far right start to approach these issues in the 1970s. There were a lot of people, let's say in the John Birch Society, people who worked at General Electric, actually. General Electric was a huge part of this, who started organizing sort of a plan in their minds of changing politics over the next 30 or 40 years. And they were very successful because they didn't say, okay, we're going to try to abolish Medicare tomorrow, or we're going to drastically hike the Social Security age. They said, no, we will fund a sustained program of attacking these issues over and over and over for many years to come. And that's sort of, a big part of the reason of why we ended up here today. So I think that's, one advice that I'd give to institutional progressives and to funders and activists is to look at what the right did. You could never talk about doing the things that they're talking about doing to these programs if you were in the 1970s or even if you were in the 1980s to some extent, right? But because they invested so much over time in a sort of a long-term thinking scenario, I think they were able to get to where they are today.
Joel, you've been on the inside for quite some time. How long did you work on Capitol Hill, Joel?
I worked on Capitol Hill for 13 years, but I was a lobbyist for about 10 before I went to Capitol Hill.
Mm-hmm. And so based on your view from the inside out, you've seen organizing, you've seen successful examples, you've seen not so successful examples. When it comes to the progressive movement, what is your view on what needs to happen in order to strengthen the movement?
I liked what my colleague just said on the phone about the need for a strategic assessment by progressives. One thing that I did notice is that when the AFL-CIO walked into the room, everybody stopped what they were doing because we knew that Trumka represented an organization that could make or break your boss's political life because they provided so much funding to the party, to the Democrats, but also because they had so much, manpower and woman power on the ground. Same thing I would say with any group, whether it was the National Rifle Association or AIPAC or what have you. And what was clear to me was whoever had the most political strength, it was usually there was a lot of constituents in that particular district. So I think there would need to be a leadership conference somewhere in D.C. or New York with people who are pretty cool, easy to get along with. Our progressives have been doing this for a long time. It needs to last over a period of maybe 4 months where we have strategic discussions about what do we need to do to, take keep the White House, Democrat, but flip the Congress. And we have not had that discussion yet. How do we get the Tea Party out of power? How do we flip the Congress? And then what is our 10-point plan? What is our goal? The Republicans had a goal. It was simple: eliminate government and reduce taxes. I don't think progressives have had a long enough conversation to build a political consensus on exactly what they want to achieve. But once you can kind of bring people together, then you can start talking about your organizing structure and opening up offices. But we would need to have, I think, one organization or one broad coalition with chapters in 435 congressional districts in 50 states with several millions of dollars in the bank, with paying organizers, where we can get our people elected to Congress so they can distribute the wealth and from the rich to the rest of us and have a different foreign policy. And we are so far from even that kind of a conversation. And the next question is, who should be in that room? Why haven't we had that conversation? And, I would say it's because I think we need new leaders like the people on this phone. But I'm optimistic that we can build a mass-based, multiracial, 21st century rainbow coalition. Because if we don't do that, we're going to lose the planet to climate change, I believe. And we're going to say, now we're in a position, and I'll close with the statement that if we have about, I think if Lester Brown is right and over 100 scientists, we got about 7 years, maybe 7 to 8 to get CO2 down. And if we don't do that, it's irreversible. That means drought, famine, crazy weather that we can't even imagine. So we're going to have to create that organization fast, or we may not have a planet that's sustainable. So we don't have the privilege anymore of people saying, well, I don't want to work with this group and I don't like coalitions. We have to do this pretty quick.
Well, actually, Melissa, people for 4 days, they don't want to get together, much less 4 months. I think 4 days is a long time. 4 months is certainly a long time. Don't people think that they've already done this, come together to come up with a plan and to advocate around?
Isn't that happen every day in D.C.? There's like one table or another. I mean, how many different tables exist in D.C. where they're having these conversations? Mm-hmm. I think one of the challenges is, one, in the room, for the most part, are people who have economic security. So regardless of what happens, their individual lives are going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And I think we're still stuck in this idea that you need central organization in order to make change. And that's ignoring the reality of the success, regardless of the politics of it, of change.org, with individual people being able to start their own petitions and win. You've seen Occupy spring up without a central, yes, there are central organizers within Occupy, but for the most part, around the country, the ones that sprung up in Omaha, Nebraska, or in Iowa.
But Occupy went nowhere.
Obama got reelected because of the messages that Occupy put out. I mean, Occupy in itself isn't going to make broad-based change, but that model of people will come to, if people are given a reason to organize, you can trust people in local communities to come together. You don't need a necessarily top-down driven model where you have 5 directors sitting around a table in DC telling everybody in the country what to do on one day of action. You need both. You need a hybrid of people coming together in DC that are able to push, but you also need it flexible enough so people all over the country that can step up and run campaigns that win in their community. And you have enough people funded that want to do it professionally, but you're supporting the folks that want to come together on their own in their communities.
Zed, what Melissa is arguing is for spontaneous grassroots organizing. But the big critique of Occupy is that it was never connected to a true policy agenda. And the folks, it took, by the time they figured out what their policy agenda was, the movement was starting to fall apart. And so, what if you were to construct the Occupy movement all over again? How would you do it, Zed?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of a mix of what they're saying, in the sense that, I think you do need like professionally funded people who are just like day in, day out going to work on this. But I think one of the big things that the institutional progressives, meaning like organizations that, have 12 staffers or whatever and like a 1 million member list. So I think one thing that they're struggling with right now is that often their organizations set an agenda and then they reach out to activists or they reach out to their member list, try to raise some money, do some things with them. And they have some moderate success doing that. But I think something the right has done really, really well is that it's created sort of a culture of activism among activists, and it supports them wherever they are. So like, let's say you have a local Tea Party group. Okay, it's going to do Romney 2012 campaigning. It's going to help elect local Republican congressmen. But also, if they have like a local water ordinance that they hate, and that's government interfering, so on and so forth, they can hit up, this national organization and get funds and resources to help fight that water ordinance. They can talk to 12 other Tea Party groups in the state and start fighting that ordinance. They have, I think, a brilliant sort of organizing structure to where, yes, they are sort of on the same plane with these national organizations and national causes and like electing the next Congress and all that, but they're also day-to-day staying engaged in politics, creating a culture of the sort of country they want to see by being engaged on everything from local ordinances to state ballot initiatives to federal elections. And I think that's really the sort of brilliant organizing model that we need to start moving towards. I think one of the reasons that I think this hasn't worked as much for us is because we had a difficult time sort of defining ourselves as far as who we are as progressives. I think over the past few years, the word progressive has sort of, analog to saying that, okay, I'm for gay rights, or I'm for women's rights, or I have general, tolerance for diversity, that sort of thing. And I think that's been successful enough to where you're seeing even a lot of Republican lawmakers come and say, yes, I do support marriage equality. But, we haven't had the same success in saying, well, okay, if you're a progressive, that means, at every single level, you need to be working to expand labor rights. or at every single level, you need to be working to expand social programs to reduce the burdens that are on students right now. I think once we create that same sort of culture we've created for supporting diversity, tolerance, gay rights, women's rights, if we can create that same sort of culture on these other broader issues that matter a lot to us, I think then we'll be on the way to being able to do like what the right does in terms of organizing at every single level and having a sort of a strong culture of cooperation between these institutional progressive organizations and just grassroots activists.
And
Maya, can I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead. Last word. We're running out of time. Mm-hmm.
The problem with the current state of organizing is every time the far right is going to dismantle Medicaid or Social Security, and you and I have been doing this for decades, you have to reinvent and create new coalitions. Mm-hmm. It takes too much time. We're going against Wall Street, corporate America. The other side is just too large, and wouldn't it make sense to just put together, like once and for all, one progressive coalition that's community-based and grassroots and it has a structure that is cohesive but decentralized? Because why keep losing all these battles when we could fight better? And I think if people are more serious about winning battles for the people, we'd have to really start thinking out of the box and come up with a new way of organizing. And that's inside, outside, but where you're really going to win. You're going to win the battles.
I'm going to actually let Melissa have the last word. What's your response to that?
I think that in the current state, like one organization or one coalition doesn't work because people with the internet and with their own independence they have the autonomy to go out and do this. We need to be able to create the messaging and to create the reason for why people should do this, and then welcome in new people and have the education going. The reason why we have to reassemble every 5 years to fight on Social Security and Medicare is that on the years in between, we're not making the argument for why it's important. So instead of just having one organization come in top down, say this is what we should do, we should really be creating a culture of political engagement that happens in between the fights and allows people to come in and add value to it and listen and know how to be engaged and how to get onboarded to it.
So as I guess I'm going to have the last word, because as the chair of the board of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, I know that they're actually doing information and education 24/7, even between elections. And so I think the question becomes one of, how do you actually amplify and integrate these kinds of organizing messages across organizations on an ongoing basis, not just on a political cycle. And with that, I would like to thank my guests. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zed Jelani. Thank you, Joel Siegel, for a wonderful and engaging conversation today.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you so much.
And thanks to our sponsor, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, for allowing us to be on the air. Thank you to Peter James Callahan, the production team here at We Act Radio. And I want to remind you to join us every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on weactradio.com or 1480 AM if you live in the Washington, D.C. area. Until next time.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.